What's up guys, this is TheKephas, and in this video I will be showcasing some new macros that I have created for World of Warcraft patch 8.0 using a mod called Gnome Sequencer Enhanced. For the purposes of making these macros available as soon as possible, please understand that this video is not a class guide. It will focus exclusively on the macros and how to use them. But don't worry, I fully intend to make new class guides once we're a bit deeper into Battle for Azeroth. Today we will be taking a look at the macro that I have created for survival hunters. Here, you will see me using it to level up in Stormsong Valley on my Dwarven Hunter. This macro should work in just about every situation at pretty much every level, using new abilities and talents as you unlock them. It's designed to use all of the abilities in your rotation, and it adds a lot of utility to make it even more useful. For starters, if you don't have a pet summoned and it's not dead, it will summon the pet in your first slot, and it will also command that pet to attack your target. The macro will also turn off Growl if you're in a group, and if you're not in a group, it will turn Growl back on. It will even cast Misdirection on your pet, unless you have a focus target, in which case it will cast Misdirection on that target. And that's the utility side, but now let's talk about the rotation side. As I said, the macro is designed to use pretty much all of the abilities in your rotation, but there are a couple of abilities that are somewhat problematic. Abilities like Kill Command, Coordinated Assault, and Wildfire Bomb work easily within the macro because they're simple cooldown abilities. Carve is another cooldown ability, and it would work easily within the macro, but it's only to be used for AoE situations, so it hasn't been included. So make sure that you put it on a separate button and use it whenever it's needed. Now, the two abilities that did provide a challenge were Raptor Strike and Serpent Sting. This is because neither of these abilities have a cooldown and the macro would use them all the time. This isn't good for Serpent Sting because you only want to cast it whenever you're refreshing the dot, and it's not good for Raptor Strike because it would leave you focus starved. Initially, I was going to leave these abilities out of the macro and simply use them on separate buttons, but I decided to experiment with cast sequence and see if I could come up with anything. After some testing, I've created a cast sequence line that combines Raptor Strike and Serpent Sting with Kill Command. Kill Command acts as the perfect buffer because it has a relatively short cooldown. It should prevent you from using Serpent Sting too much, and most of the time, you'll only use it just as the dot is about to fall off. It also allows the macro to use Raptor Strike just enough to keep your focus bar on the better side of half full. For the most part, in my experience, this seems to work out pretty well, but it is a somewhat complex cast sequence line, and those are never going to be perfect. So you may sometimes find that the macro is using Serpent Sting more than it needs to, or you may find that the macro is leaving you with more or less focus than you'd like. If that's the case, then the best course of action for you would be to use Raptor Strike and Serpent Sting on separate buttons. You can simply remove the cast sequence line from the macro and replace it with cast Kill Command. This will make sure that the macro is still using Kill Command on cooldown, leaving you to use Raptor Strike and Serpent Sting as you see fit. Overall though, I found that this macro works great if you're just looking for a simple way to play a survival hunter, which is exactly what these macros are designed for. And the best part is that this macro is designed to work with all the talents in your new talent tree. But to make sure that you have a full understanding of how the macro works with the talents, we will go over each tier one by one. The first tier is all passive, which means that any of these will work just fine with the macro. The same applies for the first two talents of tier 2, which are both passive. Butchery, however, is a replacement of Carve, and even though the macro will not use Carve, it will use Butchery if you choose this talent. I figure if you're in a situation where you want to use Butchery as a talent, the macro may as well use it on cooldown. Tier 3 is a utility tier, so let's move on down to tier 4. Bloodseeker is another passive that works wonderfully with the macro, but if you choose Steel Trap, the macro will use it. I've added an @player command in the Steel Trap line of the macro. This ensures that the target location of Steel Trap is at your feet, and this works out just fine because you're a survival hunter, which means that you're in melee range. And the macro will also use a Murder of Crows on cooldown if you choose to go with this talent. Tier 5 is another utility tier, so let's move on to tier 6. Tip of the Spear is a passive that works easily with the macro. Mongoose Bite replaces Raptor Strike, and it will work with the macro. But it may work a lot better if you're using Raptor Strike on a separate button rather than in the cast sequence line, so just keep that in mind. Flanking Strike works a lot easier in the macro, because the macro will simply use it on cooldown if you choose it as a talent. And in the last tier, we have 2 passives that work with the macro just fine. But the macro will also use Caltrop's own cooldown if you choose it as a talent. And that's basically everything you need to know about these macros and how they work. Remember, these macros work best when they are spammed, so either press the button as fast as you can or use a rapid fire button, which is fair game as long as you're the one pressing the button. As powerful as these macros are, they are far from perfect. So if you want to play the game at a high level and get the most out of your class, I highly recommend that you play the game without these macros. But if you'd like to get started with Gnome Sequencer Enhanced, you can do so by downloading and installing the mod. A link can be found in the description below. Along with it, you will find paste bin links for any macros featured in this video. If you'd like to use them, simply click the link and you'll be taken to a raw paste bin of the macro. Select the entire macro, copy, log into the appropriate class, type /gs to open the Gnome Sequencer screen, click on Import, paste the macro into the available space, make sure that Automatically Create Macro Icon is checked, and click Import. You can now drag the icon to your action bar and the macro is ready to be used. If you followed all the steps correctly, the macro should be working fine. If something isn't working, start over and make sure that you follow all the steps correctly. If you are having further issues, I recommend that you check out the mod page or contact the mod's author for more information. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and if you'd like, you can support this channel on Patreon. Links to all of this can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.